This evening we're coming to you from Elmira, New York, and we are really very, very honored and privileged to be able to be in the living room and the seminar room of one of the very most significant individuals on planet Earth that have had experiences with an altered state of consciousness, Miss Jane Roberts.
Those are beliefs against which you yourselves have fought for so long. And you are afraid that in your heart of hearts you do not trust the joyful integrity of your own being.
In the 1960s, 70s and 80s, Jane Roberts channeled the spirit known as Seth. I first heard mention of Seth some 10 years ago. Friends were suggesting I read some of the Seth material, as some of what I was channeling from my own spirit guide about the nature of reality seemed to them to be very similar. I refused at the time because I wanted to keep my connection clear. I was learning about channeling and I didn't want to be influenced by what I might read in the Seth material. More recently, Seth has surfaced again through a friend of mine, Vojkan Trifunovic, who will be known to some of you regulars on my Monday lives as the Full Monty. Vojkan has for a long time been fascinated by Seth's teachings, and now he intends to develop more content about this amazing spirit being here on YouTube. Vojkan and I recently caught up on Zoom for a conversation about Seth, Jane Roberts and all things spiritual. I think you'll find it very interesting what he has to say about manifesting and about our perception of the world in which we live. I, for one, am looking forward to hearing more in future and expect to join Vojkan again to talk about Seth soon. Here we are then, our first conversation about the nature of life from the Seth perspective. One of the things that I actually wanted to discuss with you straight away, Vojkan, and I really hope that I'm actually saying your name properly because I've been saying it as Vojkan.
No, it's okay, Vojkan. Yeah.
Okay.
Because the Englishmen often say the V-O-J, they spell it like Vojkan. What is that? I'm originally from former Yugoslavia, from Montenegro. Now that's a separate country, and it's one of the smallest countries in Europe, actually. It's neighboring Croatia, Serbia, and Albania, and on the other side of the Adriatic coast. But I have lived in Denmark for all my life, practically 50 years.
You, for a long time, have been talking to me and mentioning Seth and the Seth channelings by dear old Jane Roberts.
Exactly, yes.
And at one point, you were really trying to get me to read the material. You were seeing similarities between what we were discussing on the YouTube channel, what we were having coming out of the YouTube channel, and what Seth was saying,
yes,
and had been saying
yes,
back in the 70s. Now, I remember saying to you, no, I really don't want to be reading the Seth stuff, because at the time I was trying to write my book and I didn't want to feel that I was going to get subconsciously influenced by the Seth channelings. But,
yes,
even when I was developing my relationship with my spirit guide, my friend Adrian, who I think you've seen some material of, I've had conversations with him on the YouTube channel, he used to constantly say, Tim, you should read some Seth. You should read Seth. So look.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. He was always saying, look, with the channelings that at the time I was writing them and putting them out on blogs and things. And he said, look, this is just like Seth.
Yeah.
This is, look at Seth and see what he's saying. So here we are in 2020.
Exactly. Yes. And what I was thinking about is if you just stuck to the dowsing, divining, and things like that, you probably wouldn't have had any reason to read Seth, or because you can explain that with your current theory of things, but when you start talking about other things, which you did, spiritual things and stuff, then you came into areas that it was obvious for me that you would benefit from reading Seth. Uh, and when you say, I respected when you said I'm writing a book, I don't want to be influenced, but I thought myself, I didn't say it to you, but do you really want to write a book when you don't have the full picture or material? I, you know, but I
Yeah,
said,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
let's see. I mean, people should be ready for these things. I mean, I found Seth when I was 49, 48. So, and I've been interested in this sort of material since I was 15, 16. So, it apparently comes to you when you're ready, or I don't know how to explain.
No,
So
so
that's
if
why.
you so what was your sort of spiritual opening then? If you've been interested in this sort of stuff since you were in mid-teens, 15, 16, that sort of age, what sort of came to you first? Because obviously it wasn't Seth, I presume. It wasn't Seth
Yeah,
either.
no, it wasn't Seth. It was actually, what was it called? It was a very famous book, The Life After Death or Death After Life. I don't remember
Right.
how
Okay.
what is. Very
Yeah.
famous book,
I
Life
know.
After Death, I think.
I know there is one, isn't there? That's very well known. And I know
Yeah.
it might seem a bit bizarre, but again, you see, I haven't read a lot. I don't know a lot about a lot of different
No,
NDE.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know Hamish Miller's NDE intimately because obviously we
That's
talked
how I
about.
found you. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that is an aspect
Yeah,
that has really stuck with you then, that whole concept of near-death experience and life after death,
yeah,
and what else
yeah.
is it that sort of fascinates
I
you
think
about that?
it was based in fear of death from very young, from a child. I could lie in the evenings and just be afraid of dying and not knowing. I mean, what will happen? I won't be filled with this sort of sorrow. What will happen? The world will go on, and I won't be here to see it. That was just not. I mean, I was afraid, and I didn't know what I mean, I was very young. I didn't have the philosophical background to deal with these things. I didn't have anybody to talk to. So I started reading as maybe 12, 13, 14, this material. And there wasn't a lot of it at that point. That was in the 70s, late 70s. So I just grabbed everything I could find. And so it was on and off. In my 30s, I didn't read much. I was too busy with my business and family, so not enough time. And then I fell back to it when my mother died again in 2007. There has been stuff before, but 2007, my mother died, and I suddenly fell over the Casey material,
Yeah.
which is entryway to for many people, as far as I understand now. And that was just soothing for me. I mean, I remember I was very connected to my mother, and it was very hard for me. And read him, and again were reintroduced to that we don't die, we live on, and all that, and that was very comforting. And then a couple of years later, I started reading, and when I read, I get a sort of totally immersed. I read everything and many times, and then I fell over the raw material.
Oh, the raw material.
Raw
Yeah,
material. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And Casey mentioned Ra. He was, according to himself, a reincarnation of a person called Ra, who built the Egyptian empire after Atlantis went down.
Right.
He was one of the greatest at that point.
Yeah.
So I fell over that and found it very interesting. I read it all in a couple of days, and I was alone in my village up in the mountains in Montenegro. I was alone, and it was fall, I think. So I was sitting alone, and it's kind of eerie material. I mean, it's not like the Seth material, which
No.
is a little bit Pollyanna.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it can be. It talks about intrusions from evil. the whole basis of the raw material is that we progress up through the dimensions, but we do that based on whether we are service to self, egoistical, actual, that's the evil part, and the service to others, which is the good parts. And those that are service to self can evolve to such a sort of, I don't know if evil is the right word, but where they have planets where there's dictatorships, and everybody's there is evil, not evil, but service to self. But they are in a category. I mean, they get used and mistreated, and so.
Yeah.
So reading that in the mountains alone, I mean, and I was totally alone. There was nobody. Was eerie, and but it was very eye-opening and interesting. All that talk about 3D, 4D, 5D we hear on you can see it on YouTube, the shift, the event, all these, that actually has basis in the raw material, because he was the first one who Casey also did, but he was the first one who defined it like that we are moving up through those dimensions. And that's the way we ascend to the 7th or 8th dimension. And then after that, a couple of years again, I fell over it was introduced to the Seth material. And that was just an eye-opener. I mean, that's probably the best channel material, philosophical material that exists on the planet. I don't know anything better, because it's so, I mean, she wrote, I think 17 or 20 books with Seth, with the channel. Her name was Jane Roberts. She was born in 1920, I think I have it somewhere here. 1929 in Elmira, in New York, and in the state of New York in USA. And suddenly in 1963, she found out that playing with the Ouija board, actually, she didn't have any prior existence, knowledge of channeling. Yeah, this was 63, and suddenly this spirit appeared, which started telling us things that were very, very deep, very philosophical, and this, in the start, she was a bit defensive, and she wasn't raised. She was raised as a Christian, and so on. And she was probably an atheist, actually. And but slowly she dropped the Ouija board. She found out she could talk or channel him, and she didn't stop channeling him until 1984, when she died.
Oh wow!
So 21 years of channeling.
Wow.
With and what was most amazing, that everything was documented. Her husband, Robert Butts, I think, took notes of everything. He invented his own stenographical system and wrote everything down from the first session to the day she died. So we have all this big material that is consistent.
That's what I was going to say. Consistency.
Very consistent. Yeah. Also, when they could go months between the sessions, and he was dictating a book. He stopped at one sentence, and 4 months later, he just continued from the next sentence.
Yeah,
and that was just amazing. I mean,
that's awesome. You know, that is awesome. I caught a little bit of 1970s black and white footage of her channeling him. Channeling Seth, and I've got no doubt watching that.
Yeah,
she's definitely channeling. You know, there's no doubt about it. And she also, it's really interesting.
She got an accent, yes.
Yeah, well, it's a weird way of talking, isn't it? I mean, that is a weird way of talking.
Yeah, very. Yeah.
But not as strange as it could have been. Some mediums tend to get really strange with the voice. But what was really interesting from my point of view was, it's really interesting that you said that she didn't actually have formal training to get to that point. Because what I noticed about when she does it, she just flips. she just goes straight from being her, Jane Roberts, and then bang, she's straight into Seth.
Boom.
He's there, and then she flips out again, you know, eventually when she's finished that
Yes.
bit or he's finished that bit. And it's like, that is really
Exactly.
impressive. You know, that really is
Yes.
impressive.
I mean, there are stories of her when he came through. It happened so suddenly that usually he didn't like the
Oh, yeah,
glasses apparently, so he
that's
took the
right.
glasses off. But sometimes he was so angry or wanted to say something that glasses were thrown across the room, you know, and she held these classes, maybe 30, 40 people inside, and those glasses was hurled on the other side. And this big voice came out of that little woman. That was
Yeah,
so amazing. I mean, that was,
yeah,
and that, I don't know, Middle European accent, very strange accent. Yeah.
yeah.
But
Strange.
consistent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, so very good. So
And
how do you? I was just going to ask you, how do you sort of refer to the Seth material? Do you kind of think to it when you're going through your day-to-day job, or is it just something that you enjoy reading and kind of
oh
being with?
no, yeah, I wish it was, because no, it has it's a way of life actually. It's a whole philosophy of, and it's very deep actually, and it penetrates into a lot of things, uh, uh, and the basis of all that is probably because of the primary objective or basic preposition, which is you create your own reality, not in a figurative,
Mm,
symbolic sense, but
mm.
uh, and
Actual,
that means
yeah,
actual, yeah,
yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
I'm sorry, my English is not
No, your English
best.
is brilliant. Your English is
Uh,
fantastic. It'll get better as
Thank
we
you.
can continue to talk. But yeah,
Yes, I probably, yeah, because I don't use it. I read and write a lot, but no, I don't. This is not the first time we have heard about that philosophy. Or we have Neville Goddard, who spoke of the same. He was also a famous spiritual teacher, and others from the United States, and Blavatsky, I think, also talked about it, and other. Uh, but what he actually meant, and he doesn't speak so much about it, but he says, as an example, if there's a room, and in that room there's a chair, uh, that chair is only in that room when you think about it.
right.
Okay, so that's if there are two people in that room, there are two chairs. There's the chair that I form, and the chair that he forms. When I go out, my chair disappears. Uh, the way we synchronize our vision of what we see is by telepathy,
Mm,
which he says functions so fast that it's a million times per second, actually, or something like that. He actually says when you walk on the beach on the sand, only the top layer of the sand exists, the thing that you can see.
okay.
Beyond that, there is nothing. You create your own reality.
Yeah.
And then you can go deeper into who is he. When you say you create your own, who are you? And that's not just a simple thing. And the reality is not a simple thing.
Mm,
You can go deeper into that, but you cannot think like that in the day-to-day world,
mm,
because that will just impair you, I think. But that is what is actually happening. The universe that is created around us is created a million times a second. It's like a very
yeah.
fast pulse.
Yeah.
So there are periods that are just as long where there is nothing, because if 1 second on, 1 second off, the reality we see is created by ourselves, but not just our ego selves that we see before us when we look in the mirror, but also by our higher self. And that is something also he talks about. We are just a part of a higher self. We don't disappear when we die, but we are part of something bigger, a
Yeah.
bigger entity. And that entity is you, just as much you as you are, only that don't feel it in your day-to-day life, but it is there, and it also has something to say about your life. It helps you create your reality. And that reality that you have is co-created with all the people on the planet in a mass creation. For example, the weather, catastrophes, big things, viruses even, are created by this mass creation of many people at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of what you do and what
Yeah.
all the planet does.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is what I love is that that really good, basic and true spiritual teachings, which is what the Seth channelings are, as far as I'm concerned, what I know of them, and what you've just described just completely fits in with what I mean. Literally, you know, that is exactly the stuff that my guide has been saying to me for years. Almost, you know, it could have been almost word for word. You might as well have been standing there instead of Merlin, to be honest, telling me that. So, but everything that you've said correlates with that, right? Which so to me it says, yeah, Seth is really good basic, you know, spiritual truth. So much more to it than just the essence of things like that were put across in The Secret, for example, which I'm not sure I've ever even seen or particularly haven't read it. But you know, where this whole where the populace was basically introduced to the idea of manifesting your own world and creating things, which is really what that was doing.
Exactly, events and things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the populistic version, if I can say so. And I'm going to say some things that perhaps will not fall into everybody's taste, but that's the way it is. The Secret came suddenly, and it brought this way of thinking to the masses, became very popular, and many of the most famous persons in the world relate to that type of to that logic, or what is described in The Secret. But when you read Seth and when you read The Secret, or what Esther Hicks and Darrell Anka is also very famous propagators of that idea. It's like explaining something to a 5-year-old child where you can't go into the depths of things. It's very superficial, exactly. Yeah. And when that is said, if it weren't for those two, I mean, the Seth material has existed since the 70s. And what could, I mean, it didn't just pearl the masses, but you had to be into that sphere to read it. Esther Hicks and Darrell Anka, I mean, it exploded with them and the Secret, the film. And I'm not sure that people would just read Seth by themselves. I have this pyramid of manifestation that I've made. If we look at the pyramid, what Abraham and Bashar are talking about are primarily the visualization part.
Right.
And if you listen to The Secret, it is about visualization, primarily about that. If you look at Seth and what he is talking about, and that is why I have made this pyramid, it is actually not visualization. That's just a small part of it. It is the beliefs that control your reality. It is all based on beliefs. So, for example, if you try to manifest something, let's say money, but your inner belief is that you either don't deserve money, or that you don't like the rich people because they are bad and evil, then that belief will, because it's at the basis of everything. You can visualize from today, kingdom come, nothing will happen, because you will work against it. So many people, when they have problems visualizing things into reality, that's probably one of the things they should look into. That is, do I have any blockages or things that works against what I'm trying to manifest? And the second thing is emotions. Beliefs create emotions, and emotions are like fuel to the manifestation process. It's like you put petrol on the fire when you have large emotions about something. You want this so much. And I have a little manifestation technique I use in the day-to-day when I want something. Usually not big things, but smaller things. I would like a call or something to happen during the day. I just fill myself with emotion that at the end of the small meditation, it just takes a few seconds. It explodes out of me like a supernova. And then I know that emotions have been added to the belief and is creating something, is pushing something further on. And then when you have done that, then a very important thing are the expectations. And we know that when we were children, I mean, waiting for a Christmas tree to be open, you know, the doors to be open, and the expectations are a very important part also. And he actually calls them the building blocks of manifestation. And then you can use visualization to help you, especially in the evening before you go to bed in that period, to visualize what you want and to visualize it in detail. And this is perhaps, I don't know, there are people who doesn't agree with this, but I have also put action into the pyramid. And that is to do something physically to cement the thing you're trying to visualize. It's like buying the lottery ticket if you want to win the lottery, or go and buy brochures for the car you want to buy. But there's this old saying that says, start building the house and God will help you finish it. And that is very common. And all the houses on the Balkans, I think, have been built with that philosophy. So that's my pyramid of manifestation.
That's excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent. Yeah, it's
yeah,
excellent. And I think I think it's clear from what you were saying. But the one thing that I would say with that action, it's taking action, as you say, with the expectation, but with the expectation that it's going to be there. It's going to definitely be there,
yeah, yeah,
with no doubt at all.
yeah.
Really interesting, really
Like,
lovely
yeah,
pyramid.
like buying the saddle if you want the horse.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, you go in
yeah,
with an intent. I'm going to have
yeah,
this horse. I'm
yeah.
going to buy the saddle. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. That's absolutely, and really interesting from my point of view. Again, that you have built it on belief as the bottom layer there.
That's the bottom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's the foundation of everything, isn't it?
Yes, everything. And even if you're not into the manifestation method of Seth, if you never read about this, that is what actually controls your life. And I've analyzed my own life. What happened in my life when something happened, when something big happened, and I progressed. I mean, first I remember visualizing. I would like that. You know, that's a visualization there. And then there was a jump into it. So often not very well thought through. I mean, when I opened my own business, I didn't know how to. I quit my job and I started the business. And I talked to my wife and said, in 2 months we won't have the money to pay our loans. But we did it, and that is the belief part of it. That, I mean, this is going to happen,
Yeah,
and that is also the action part. And the emotions were there, and the expectation. Everything came into that pyramid, and I didn't even know about this method.
right.
So I think that's we are all governed by it. We
Yeah.
sometimes we just don't know
Absolutely.
what it
And
is.
I think that is the big problem. There's a wonderful book called Illusions by Richard Bach. He's the guy that
Okay.
wrote Jonathan Livingston Seagull. He did another one,
Yeah.
Illusions, small little book. But it it fundamentally highlights that, you know, that the issue that we all face, that we're in the circumstance, we're in the belief machine, if you want to call it a
Yes.
machine. We can't see that we're in the machine, and it's running by the process that we are it's us that's running it, and we don't even know we're in it,
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
the sort of thing that Illusions highlights very clearly. And that's the big difficulty that we all face, which is why we can you can have half the world's population, so you can have 8 billion people that will quite happily just be born, grow up without having any kind of spiritual thinking at all or observation, go on through their lives, have none of this concept, and die at the end of it. And that's fine. That's the way they're going to live, and that's okay. And they function perfectly well as the rest of us that are looking into it and pulling it apart and trying to figure out how it works and what's the spiritual connection and all of the rest of it, and allowing all this stuff and experiencing life in a very different way. But the system, the machine, works with either process.
Exactly. You don't have to know what is happening to be into it, and if you, it brings us into something else, perhaps. The way we are thinking about health or public health in these times where we are now, where Seth actually says the mammography, where I think where people are tested on a broader basis. I think most European countries are doing this for free for women to test for cancer in the breasts. He says that has created more cancerous. I know this is controversial, and please understand this in the right, those who are listening, in the right spirit. But he says that women start to get afraid of this, and they project the sickness into their bodies. So what we think is should be preemptive is actually not preemptive. I can tie it up with something else, just what we talked about earlier, where we said people who don't know about this, how are they living? Again, I'm going back to Montenegro, where in our house, I remember if cancer the word cancer was never spoken. They said, that he died of that disease, or he has that, God help him, it was never mentioned. And talking about bad things, no matter what it was, were not something that you do. I mean, especially not in bigger congregations. So it seems that we either have an old tradition where we know about, we manifest things by our words, by the way we speak, think, believe, or maybe it's inherent in us, in our psychology, that we know these things, and that's why we don't talk about them. Interesting. And the whole, what we talked about before, I mean, this could change the whole system of health.
Indeed.
And in the world, if we thought about it differently. I mean, just
well,
those packages on the cigarettes with these terrible pictures, I so disagree with that. I mean, people who smoke, they smoke, and they will smoke whatever. They're not going to be put away by the pictures. What it could create are those pictures to become true.
It is contentious, but but certainly I can understand exactly what you're saying, and it's something that I've always been a little bit aware of. I remember back in my corporate days, when I used to be in the corporate world, suit and tie, everything, as a consultant. I used to work for a life assurance company. It was Sun Life Assurance of Canada, one of the bigger life assurance companies in the world. I was in the media department, helping out. I was a contractor. I used to help them produce training material and all this sort of stuff. And I used to, have a lot of contact with the sales guys, the guys on the street and the women on the street that would be out there selling life assurance of various forms, or critical illness cover, for example.
Okay.
And one of them said, he said, Tim, we sell this because I know from my statistics that a third of the people that I sell this critical illness cover to, within 2 years, they develop a critical illness. And do you know what? Yeah, And you know what? What I thought immediately,
Yeah,
as soon as he said that, I thought, oh, I bet they do, because they know that they're covered. And what's happened is that actually in that transaction, they've basically sown the seed for their own critical illness. And because they can, because it'll be all right if I get a critical illness,
exactly.
because the money's there
Yeah,
now.
exactly. Or have buying a burglary alarm, or
Yes.
there's a in the Seth community, there's a famous person. She wrote a book about Seth, a series of books. Linda Madden Dawes is her name. I think she ran the Seth organization in the USA some years back. And she writes in a book and on her Facebook page that she has, I think, canceled all her insurance policies, both health and burglary and everything. And she doesn't lock her car when she leaves it. Has never been broken into. And
Yeah.
I have been like that my whole life. I have this, and before I read this strange self, where I don't know how to call it, but
Self-awareness.
those things just, yeah, those things just won't happen to me.
Yeah, right.
And every time I've left my car open or the front door, I have never had somebody come in.
No, it is
So
interesting,
that's, yeah.
and because this is,
That doesn't mean you should do this.
I know that's
Those
right.
listening, we're
You're not
not. Yeah, no,
recommending.
no. But just
Everybody
think
can.
about it. Yes, we don't want any lawsuits.
No,
Oh,
it'll be fine.
yeah.
But this, so what's really interesting, and we'll actually just wrap up with this thought, and we'll have another conversation again very soon, because it's been great. But this is what one of the things when I started doing the house healing work, one of the things that became very obvious was that every client comes to me or to any house healer exactly the same, or any life coach, really, any of these sort of therapists. The person comes with their entire world, and their entire world is completely unique and distinctive. And one of the issues is that we do is really look at how does that world that this person has created, how do they function in that world? Because some people will stagger from crisis to crisis, no matter, up to that point, hopefully, because one of the things that we would hopefully do would be to help them see that actually they're creating and they're living off these crises.
Exactly.
And so,
if you have failed marriages, failed love relationships, failed jobs, chronically bad economy, look at that pyramid we have talked about, and see, is there something in that's manifesting that into your life? Probably is.
Yeah,
I would even say 100%. That's the problem.
Yeah. Absolutely, and that comes right back to what you said about blockages.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Excellent. Well, on behalf of those that will watch this, because I will cut this together and we'll put it out onto YouTube. So thank you very much for a first conversation. It's really been really enjoyable. So good one, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you. Nice talk. Yeah. Great.
Have a nice
See you
evening.
soon. Yeah.